If you haven't heard of Jen Allen and the marketing team at Lavender, well, you probably haven't logged into LinkedIn in the last couple of months because they have been making a ton of noise. Everyone on their marketing team changing their name to Will for a few days on LinkedIn included in that. In this conversation with Jen, we do get tactical in how marketing teams can do a better job engaging their community on LinkedIn. But what I think is really fascinating that as head of community growth at Lavender, Jen and her team have decided not to start a formal community yet. They echo something that we talk about at Partner Hacker all the time. Go win in an ecosystem before you try to build your own. So we get very tactical in how they're doing that, how they're finding other communities and ecosystems that they can tap into, and maybe some counterintuitive stuff when it comes to marketing with referral partners they have chosen not to pay or offer any financial reward to their strongest referral partners and advocates. All right, with that, this is a chock full episode, so let's get right into it.
When I came over to Lavender, I had just left a company I spent 18 years with, and I was a seller that entire time. So this is actually my first marketing job, my first community job. And when Will Allred approached me and said, "Hey, we've got this role in mind to you," I was like, "I can give you 6, 7 names of people that have done this before, that have built communities, that know exactly what to do." I don't have the faintest clue. My only exposure was the community social that Will Aitken, Nick Capozzi, and I founded. And that was just like a fun thing for us, right? So I came into this job being completely freaked out because I've never built one truly for a company and I didn't really exactly know what it meant. But what Will Allred said to me at the time was, we actually don't want to bring in someone that has built a community because we don't want to build a community that's been done before. We have a highly engaged audience who like are amazing and they talk about us on LinkedIn and they hang out there. And what we want is someone who understands our audience, someone who understands salespeople and the things that make it hard, and someone who can relate to them. And that's why we want you to come in and think about it, because we intentionally want to do it differently. So that kind of like took the pressure off a little bit. And the way that we're currently thinking about it is, for the first half of the year, it is observing, watching, learning from where our potential users go to hang out, the communities that they participate in. Like, one of the things that I can empathize with is I think a lot of marketing organizations are hearing community led growth and they're being told, go build something. And it's to be able to check a box to say, look, we've got a community, we've done it, like, here we are. And I was really appreciative that Will, our founders, said, we don't want to fall into that trap. We don't want to create something just to create something. So go out there, go to communities like Thursday Night Sales, like Sales Assembly, like SDR Leaders, and observe what they're doing with their audience, where there are unmet questions, what type of vibe they seem to draw to, what are the options. And then once you've got a really good assessment of current state, then we can start to think about what are the gaps that are not being met by current communities. Because one thing, the last thing I'll say on it is, like, if you look at a community like TNS, right, like there is such a tremendous loyalty to that community. If we try to rip off what TNS is doing, but just do it for Lavender, not only would that be just a completely ugly look, it would be largely ineffective because that need is already being met. So I think it's largely about where is the unmet need and where can Lavender step in on that.
Let's double down on this of you don't have an existing community. You're looking for other communities to partner with as you're getting engaged with the audience and the community that you're trying to reach. How do you guys think about what are those? How do you approach those folks? Not trying to be sneaky of just like, hey, we're going to kind of creep in here for a bit and then we're going to go do better what you're not doing over here. How do you approach those? How do you think about identifying those and then engaging those folks and participating in those communities?
Yes, great question. So there's a couple things we're looking at. One is the audience that we serve, not our buyer, but the audience that we serve. That is the AE writing a sales email. It is the marketer writing a sequence. It's the SDR writing an email to try to get that first call. We're looking at where they hang out. I think this was something that I really admired about the approach. It is so easy to get sucked into, like, let's find where all the decision makers hang out and go spend time there. But I think what we appreciate is being able to relate to and understand our end user is job number one, because not only does that in turn inform our product development, it informs how we speak to them and how we get them so fired up that they want to go tell their boss about us. So when we're looking at communities, we're looking at who are bringing those end users together in a really fun, natural way that's true to our brand. So I named a couple of the partners that we've started working with, but SDR leaders with Sam Nelson as an example, he's done a terrific job of taking a largely underserved market, which are the first time managers who are now over SDRs, and saying, I'm going to help you with all the stuff that you probably aren't getting from your organization. Like you're a first time manager. That's crazy. That's hard. We largely underserve managers in sales all the time. So I'm going to connect you with other people and we're going to help think through questions that you may be fearful of asking your boss. When we came across Sam's group, we were like, that is perfect, right? Because there are so many unanswered questions for first time managers like that. We can lean in and help give context around one of the hard parts of that job. And so, what we're looking for are people and communities and partners that are largely focused on education and teaching, because that's how we want to show up. That's what we want our first impression to our users to be is, wow, that's an organization that's really helpful. They've got a lot of interesting, useful, practical things to say. So that's just one example of a company where they've got the right ICP, and the way that they engage with them is really aligned with how we want our first impression to be for a user.
I think that call out between who are our buyers and who are our users is something really important. It's something I've heard Todd talk about a little bit in
Yes.
like how do you equip the people who are actually using it? I think we've seen a little bit of that over the years with, let's say, HubSpot, building out those HubSpot user groups, right? It was all about empowering the users to create those raving fans. The people in those user groups probably aren't the ones who are signing off on buying HubSpot, right?
Yeah.
So I think that makes a lot of sense. So you're identifying folks who have engaged communities with your users rather than necessarily your buyers. Obviously, there's some overlap, but I love that distinction in thinking. How are then you guys showing up? Are you pitching these partners on, hey, we can host, we can teach, or are you just saying, hey, we want to hang out, or we want to help you make this section of it bigger? What are some of the things that have organically come up or that you guys have methodically thought about once you've identified those communities that you want to engage with those other community leaders on?
Yeah, so this was a place where Will Allred, because Will Allred was managing a lot of this stuff, so it's why I keep mentioning him. And when I came on, part of it was to help provide some lift. So one of the first things he said to me is, I don't ever want to pay to have our name on a banner. Like if that is the extent of our relationship with a partner, we've done something wrong on our end. And so I'll give you another example of a type of partner to answer that question would be universities. So universities, many universities now have sales programs. So one of the ones that I'm really fond of is Dr. Dover's program down at University of Texas, Dallas. And they are doing tremendous things to build these students who literally come out and are like sharper than I was probably in my fifth year of selling. And so we look at an audience like that and we think about, hey, how would we want to show up to them? If we show up and say, hey, Dr. Dover, we want to pitch Lavender to all your students, he's going to be like, you can take a hike, right? But if we come in and say, we understand that when you are learning how to write a cold email, it is so easy to get pulled into the direction of how we all were taught to write growing up, like big long sentences, big fancy words. We're trying to impress someone, big chunky text. So we would be happy to come in and help in alignment with what you're teaching your students, share what Lavender has taught us about what things tend to hurt our reply rates. Like the motion is a belief system that if we teach, if we educate, good will come back to us, right? And so all of the partnerships that we talk about, so if it's SDR leaders, if it's sales assembly, if it's these university partnerships, is built on this premise that we're not just buying a logo or buying a sponsored ad or something like that, but we're actually helping that community or that partner with their job to be done, which is teaching and educating our sellers, AEs, SDRs.
Mhm. This may be a stretch, but one of the things you just said there, like finding partners. So one, not building your own community, just compete with these other communities, finding those community leaders, and then saying, hey, how can we help with your mission of your community, right? And it reminds me of something I heard Pete Caputa say, not to go too heavy on the HubSpot analogies here, but as he built the HubSpot Solution Partner Program, their agency program from scratch from day one, it was don't teach your solution partners how to sell your product. Teach them how to run a better business. right? And
Yes.
I think the very same thing as with like an agency partner program applies here in community building. Show up to those other community partners and don't show them all the value of your product and why they would want to take your sponsorship dollars and let you come in and pitch. Look at what they're trying to do, help facilitate and contribute to that. And then the natural thing will come back. Actually, shout out to Pete Caputa. He was a phenomenal episode 1 on this show. If you haven't checked that out, go check that out after you listen to Jen and I. But finish this conversation first, because we're going to be talking about, let's talk about you're showing up on these other formal communities. But a big thing you guys are doing is looking at where are the informal communities. LinkedIn's a part of that. Maybe there's some other things. Tell me a little bit about how quote unquote informal communities play into your strategy of marketing with other partners and marketing with the community that you're trying to bring into the fold at Lavender.
Sure. So it goes back to one of the first things we talked about, right? Which is knowing, where do your users hang out? Where do they go to learn? And we are lucky in the sense that LinkedIn is essentially full of salespeople of all different levels, right? So we know that. When the Wills hired me and Todd and Chelsea and Will Aitken, which is our marketing team, we all thought it was because, okay, we're kind of creators and it's like a creator led strategy. And it made sense. And then we came in and they explained it actually has nothing to do with like you being a creator or you having reach. It has everything to do with when you show up on LinkedIn, we notice that you are adding to the conversation, you're helpful, and we like that. And so we want to magnify that. Because if you look at Will Allred or Will Balance, right, they're constantly just being like, here's all this great, helpful teaching for cold email. And you could argue, like, aren't you just totally eroding the value of your product if you're just giving everybody kind of the cheat code? And the answer is no, right? Because you can learn something once and then forget it the next day. We all have been through that. So when we're showing up on LinkedIn, one of the things that was candidly a shift for me a bit coming from Challenger was often SDRs are a big user of our product, and SDRs aren't serious, stoic executives, right? Like they like memes, they like gifts, they like to have fun, they like being playful and cheeky. And so even if you watch the tonality of my posts and my content from Challenger versus here, you'll notice a huge shift, because I think one of the things this team does a really good job of is knowing our audience, recognizing that social media is part entertainment, part education, and trying to strike that right balance. So you'll see us do stupid stuff. Like when Will Aitken joined, we all changed our name to Will that day. And of course, like there were all these announcements going out about other things, and people are like, I can't find you. But we were like, you know what? Let's forget about all that because it's fun, it's playful, it'll get people talking. And so things like that, it's not 3 weeks of strategy meetings. It's literally someone in Slack being like, what if we did this stupid thing today? And we do it, we have fun with it. And in turn, I think our users and our audience has fun with it too.
There's so much there. I mean, at the top of this episode, I mentioned everybody being named Will, right? That is what stuck in my mind over the last several weeks with Lavender, even though, like you said, it wasn't this giant strategic thing. It was like a Slack message that turned into a quote unquote campaign, but obviously like saying it's a campaign, like is completely the old way of thinking about it, right? But that's what it is. It's like, this is what we're going to do together to engage our audience. But again, we're gonna bring them into the fold. We're gonna say, hey, look at this dumb stuff we're doing. Like, and I think you're right there on understanding your audience. Right? There's a reason that daily sales humor and corporate bro, have blown up. You guys understand what's resonating with your users. I think I even said buyers. Remember that users versus buyers, y'all. Like, you're going to have to hear it a couple of times on this episode for it to sink in. And I think that's one of the takeaways already. In a previous episode on this show, we talked with Nick Bennett about how to leverage relationships with creators with your brand. And he brought up Lavender, even as you said that, like, hey, we weren't brought in because we have audience and we're necessarily creators. But we were brought in because we sparked the conversation and we're helpful. Actually, I could argue that that's what makes you a good creator. So it's actually not an either or. It's a yes and, or it's a yes because. But I think that's also interesting. So let's talk about that a little bit. So you guys aren't afraid to do stupid stuff, which engages your community because they don't see it as, oh, there was this well thought out thing and it's step 3 of this campaign. What are some of the ways that you and Todd and Will and the rest of the team are trying to engage that informal community? If we're thinking about LinkedIn more as a community rather than a distribution channel, what are some of the things you guys are doing differently that you don't maybe see a lot of marketing teams doing in the way that they're trying to get success on LinkedIn if we're looking at that as a community?
Yeah, so I think so there's two things. So if we think about what makes us or motivates us as people to share something, it's usually either something that makes us look smart or something that makes us look funny, right? Like, do I share when a company is like, we got this ranking on G2? I'm like, good for you. I don't know. Like, why would I share that? It doesn't mean anything to me and it's not related to me. And so I think when you look at our content through those two lenses, in the make you look smart category, you'll notice that Will Allred will post like 52-page carousels, which he actually said out loud, he's like, this is probably a really stupid strategy and no one's going to read this, but I'm going to give you my whole playbook around what things hurt reply rates and what things help it. And I'm going to give you actual emails and I'm going to give you do this, not that. It's not going to be theoretical. It's not going to be the same old, things that we've heard over and over again. It's going to be so something you can take and do something with. And we kind of thought, we're like, no one's going to read a 52-page carousel. But then you get people in his comments being like, oh, that tactic on page 38. And we were like, what? People are reading this? But the whole intention there is just to say, like, give so much and then make it so when someone reads that and they say, wow, this is really cool, I'm not doing this, they're going to click share and they're going to share it with their team because it makes them look smart or helpful, right? So that's aspect one. Then if you look at like Lavender Joe, which was Will Balance's idea, Lavender Joe is like the antithesis of our product, right? Lavender Joe is this creator or this character they came up with where he does all the bad things as it relates to sending emails. But what's awesome about Lavender Joe is we as salespeople have all been Lavender Joe. There's so many videos where I watch it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've done that. I've totally done that. And so what it does is it allows us to laugh at ourselves. It allows us to say, look, it's human to make these mistakes and it is okay. And we're going to make a fun character out of it. But what I love about what he did is it's like, this character is so intentional. It's to hold up a mirror to say, you might think you're a great writer, but I guarantee you fall into these traps. But Lavender Joe is so funny that people tend to share it. So it's like, it's an example of more of a traditional form of media. Like it is written like an advertisement, shot like an advertisement, but we're using in a social form because we recognize people will share it because it's funny and we've all kind of been there.
How do you guys balance trying to I'd say stay organic, stay loose with things. I'm very much of that approach of move fast and break things, right? As you guys scale your efforts, right? You've already, in the last year, you've added a ton of people to the marketing team. How do you kind of think about your time spent on LinkedIn? Do you guys each say, okay, we're dedicating about this much time is posting versus engaging? Is it that structured? What things would you say to other marketing teams that don't kind of just have this natural motion already, and they're going to change the way that they're looking at LinkedIn? And one, how do we share more helpful content, but also how do we show up in the comments? How do we spend time? Because I think that's the big piece. Sharing helpful content is one, but I think showing up, spending time on the platform. If you're looking at LinkedIn as not a distribution channel, but a way to market with your community, it's enticing them to share it, but it's also sparking conversations one-to-one, doing the things that don't scale. So I guess short answer version is, how do you think about that time that you spend on LinkedIn systematically versus organically, and break down that time across the team, especially as you guys try to scale?
Yeah, so coming in, right, it was 6 people when our marketing team joined prior to us joining. And it was Will Allred and Will Balance and Dorothy and Josh, who are on our sales team, going on LinkedIn and creating content, and Will Balance like responding to people under the Lavender account. And so we were very fortunate that that was already in motion when we joined. But if you look at our team, you had mentioned in the beginning, like we don't have titles, we have areas, right? So I'm community and partnerships. Will Aitken is social, Chelsea is written content, Todd is our sales academy that we're building, and video content because he's like the best at video. So we don't have like a systematic, hey, everybody goes and posts once a day. Will Allred actually is very good about this. He posts every single morning. So he has a system for holding himself accountable. The rest of us, I think it's very organic because we're so used to showing up on LinkedIn. It's just like, oh, I got to write my post today. And we're inspired by what we see. Um, I will say when it comes to what you brought up, which is a really important point, under the corporate account, I think largely a lot of companies struggle with corporate accounts because nobody ever like tags you in it. And if you do, you feel like you've got to be really stiff and professional. One of the things I think that's really fun about Lavender is like it's very cheeky, right? So people will post about Lavender because they see the amount of social steam that we have. So there was a guy, Mason, that posted, he wrote a post about Lavender, like us getting funding. And then the next day he wrote a post announcing he was having a baby. And the following day he goes, my post about Lavender got more likes and engagement than my post about having a freaking child. And so we know that, right? And we won't always have that, but we know we have it right now. And so when we comment and engage with the corporate account, what we recognize is that is often going to bring eyes to the people who are posting about us. And that's what we want, right? Like if someone's going to take the time organically to speak positively or negatively about our product, it is our obligation, it is our responsibility to engage in that. It doesn't have to be this long professional, it doesn't have to be a product pitch. Sometimes it's like we're playing around with the joke with them. And as a result, I think what we were really happy to see is we get a lot of people just organically posting about Lavender. Like I was one of them before I joined this company. And I always kind of thought like, well, why haven't they offered me like money to keep posting about it? Like I post about them quite a bit. And I found out because we don't do that ever. And I'm not knocking people that do. I'm just saying it's a total privilege to have people who seem to have as much fun as we do posting on LinkedIn about it. So it's very important to us that we are paying attention. And the last thing I'll say is when I joined, I'm not our social person, but I asked for access to the social account on LinkedIn because then it allows me to see who in our community, informal community, is posting about us, pull them in, engage them, and keep them top of mind for when we do build a community, knowing that they're already out there active talking about us. So that's how we approach it.
Yeah, so you got access to the company page more for kind of that reconnaissance work, not necessarily for like, everybody has done kind of the individual takeover of the brand account, right?
Yeah, no, I've never posted anything from there. It's just like, who's showing up for us? And like, what are we doing for them? Are we giving back enough?
It's amazing what sort of intel and how much further you can go with that when you just look for those common overlaps. If I'm trying to do this thing, wait, where does this information, where are these signals already existing, right? I need to build a community. Wait, I should look at our company page and see our tags and see our followers and those sorts of things. It's kind of like in my role at Teamwork, I started realizing, hey, I'm building our solution partner program and agencies, but we also have a big chunk of our customer base that our end users are agencies. And so kind of occurred to me to align with our editorial lead who's doing our customer testimonials, like, hey, every time I'm having one of these conversations with a partner or a potential partner who's an agency and they're already a Teamwork Power user, I should probably have a systematic way to like show you those hand raisers, right? Because you're over here trying to find customer stories. Why don't we just like, partner up here together and not kind of divide our efforts? And I see you doing the exact same thing, which I think was a really smart move.
That's such a good example of it, right? You get two people going in two totally different directions when it's like you're over here trying to have the conversation that I'm already organically having. And it's one of the things that's been really cool too is on our Slack, we've got a channel that's, feature improvements, and we'll copy and paste things that we see people writing on LinkedIn and say, hey, people have a lot of passion around this thing. We should explore looking into it. And I think, compare that to, hey, let me call you Mr. or Mrs. Customer and drill you on what you think our product should look like. I think you're just going to get two totally different outcomes because if someone's motivated enough to write about it on social, they've clearly got a ton of passion around it and you don't have to spend so much time trying to find them.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to the kind of the okay, we're going to have all these strategy sessions around this marketing campaign, and then we're going to push that out. Same thing with like customer stories, right? We can say, okay, well, we need to get organized and we need to have this many people that represent this segment. And now we're going to, put together a 3-part email sequence that probably, doesn't follow Lavender's best practices. We're going to email these people and it's going to be an ask versus, wait, what if we collect these natural conversations and then we can approach those people and say, hey, would you like to actually take that and explain a little bit more to our product folks? They're not going to see that as an ask. They're going to be like, oh, wow,
You
you were
saw
actually
me.
paying attention to my
Yes.
little tweet, my little LinkedIn post. And actually, like you said, they already have some passion that you're tapping into, and they're going to be naturally motivated. So I love that little sidebar on just some tactical things you can do as a marketer to find the people for customer stories and the testimonials and the product feedback that you're looking for, and the community members. I think that's where we started this little tangent. Well, Jen, for the other marketers out there listening that are thinking about community, and maybe they've done some of the things that you would advise against. They've started a community to check the box. They're not engaging in other communities. They're not showing up organically and looking at the informal communities like LinkedIn. What would be some of your advice on some of the first steps they should take to be able to see some of the traction that you guys have at Lavender?
Yeah, so a couple things. So one would be go talk to your own existing customers, both top, middle, end user, and get very curious around when they have a problem, where do they go to learn today? It's very surprising to me how many companies actually don't know the answer to that question because it's not in anybody's strategic plan. But like, not when you're ready to look for a solution, but when you have a problem, who do you call? Where do you go? What do you Google? Getting so smart on that will direct us to go see who's doing this well today and how are they doing it, right? So if I spend my time just slowing down and going there, that will give me context, which then I can then take back and say, hey, is this an issue of we started a community when we frankly never should have, or we started a community, we went down the wrong path, maybe we can redirect. But I would say let your customer dictate your path. Don't let your hope for a community to pay off be the thing that like dictates your strategy. That would be one. Two would be know your audience, right? So salespeople, we can get away with having a bit more fun. I'm not saying that everybody can take Lavender strategy and do it and it'll work. I think that's pretty obvious. But let's say if you meet with, if your target stakeholder are HR leaders, right? Like, do you know how HR leaders tend to engage in a conversation with each other? Do you know what that first email looks like when they say, hey, I have a problem I want to help out with? If you don't know the right tonality, it's really going to be hard for you to bring people together and get them to have a conversation because it's going to sound like there's a stranger in the room. So learn how they talk, what they talk about, and then lastly, number 3 would be just resist the temptation to push your product. I think the goal is to lead people to realize that there is a gap that they should be using your product for. But if you are showing up in your community constantly saying like, buy this, but you're going to lose trust and credibility.
Jen, this has been an even better conversation than I thought. My bar was already pretty high because I love what you guys are doing. If someone isn't already connected with you, what's the best way for them to follow up, or any resources you want to share with the marketers listening today?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. Obviously, it's all we talked about today. Jen Allen. I have one video on TikTok. I'm a one and done girl. So if you can find me, you're an excellent investigator. And then for marketers listening who don't know Lavender, check us out, lavender.ai. Typically, the use case for marketers is if you're writing campaigns, email campaigns, it's a great way to make sure that you're optimizing and getting the right number of replies to those. So it'll help you right before you hit send. So those would be the 3 places to find us.
I love it. Well, my favorite part of this conversation, Jen, was when you said, don't just try and rip off another community. Find those communities that that are already active and go add value, help them accomplish what they're trying to do. And I think that just sums up the theme of this show, which, as we always say, we go further faster when we're marketing together.